When Shaquille O'Neal walked into the lobby of the Meridian Grand Hotel in Atlanta, Georgia, on the evening of November 7, 2022, it was 9:43 p.m., and he had been in 3 cities in 11 hours. He was wearing what he wore when he was not trying to be anything: dark jeans, a gray Henley, a black cap pulled low, and a pair of New Balance 990s that had been resold once and would need it again soon. No security, no assistant, no luggage beyond a single black duffel that he carried himself, one strap over his left shoulder, the way you carry something when the weight of it is not the point. He had a 7 a.m. call in the morning that he needed 8 hours before, and the lobby smelled like cedar and something floral, and the particular cool of a building that had been air-conditioned to impress rather than to comfort. The lobby was the kind of lobby that announces itself. Marble floor, 20-foot ceilings, a chandelier that had been described in the hotel's own press materials as architecturally significant, 2 bellhops near the entrance in matching burgundy vests, a concierge desk to the left, unoccupied, the front desk straight ahead, dark wood, backlit, the name of the hotel in brass letters behind it at a height calibrated for photographs. Behind the desk stood a woman in a charcoal blazer, name badge reading Sandra Price, general manager. Late 40s, hair precise, posture that had been practiced until it became involuntary. She was looking at her computer screen when Shaq walked in. She looked up. She looked at him. All of him, in one practiced pass, and something in her face made a small, nearly invisible adjustment. On the front desk, visible from where Shaq stopped, were 3 white key cards fanned slightly to the left of Sandra's keyboard. Each one had a yellow sticky note on it. Each sticky note said the same thing in the same handwriting: Hold, VIP. On Sandra's side of the desk, face down, was a single sheet of paper. A printed email. The edge of a name showed from Shaq's angle, cut off by the fold. Arthur G. In Shaq's breast pocket, against his chest, was a worn brown leather notebook, small enough to fit in a palm. The leather had darkened at the corners from years of handling. He touched it once, briefly, when he set his duffel on the floor, the way you touch something without meaning to, because the habit of reaching for it is older than any conscious decision. He said nothing about the notebook. He stepped up to the desk. Reservation under O'Neal, he said. Checking in, Sandra's fingers moved to her keyboard. Her eyes went to the screen. They stayed there for 4 seconds, which is 2 seconds longer than it takes to find a reservation, and 1 second longer than it takes to decide something. "I'm so sorry, Mr. O'Neal," she said. Her voice was the temperature of a room that has been climate-controlled for so long it has forgotten what weather is. "I'm showing that your reservation was released at 9 p.m. We have a standard cancellation policy for arrivals after 9, and without prior notice, I called ahead," Shaq said. "At 7:15. To the front desk. A half beat. I don't have a record of that call." "All right," Shaq said. He was not performing patience. He simply had it. "Then what's available?" Sandra looked at her screen. She looked at the 3 key cards. She looked back at her screen. "Unfortunately," she said, "we are fully committed this evening. I can recommend the Courtyard on Peachtree, which is about the courtyard," Shaq said. "It's a lovely property." He looked at the 3 key cards on the desk. He looked at the sticky notes. He did not point at them. He looked back at Sandra Price. "All right," he said again. He picked up his duffel. He walked to a chair in the lobby, a wingback near the window, the kind of chair that exists in hotel lobbies to suggest comfort without providing it, and he sat down. He did not take out his phone. He did not call anyone. He sat with his hands in his lap and looked at the lobby the way someone looks at a room when they are deciding something that has already been decided. He had been carrying something for 2 full years. Not the 7 a.m. call. That was new. That was the reason he was here. The other thing. A 34% equity stake in the Meridian Group, acquired through a holding entity in October of 2020. Structured so that his name appeared nowhere in the public record. A decision he had made quietly, and held quietly, and had not yet had occasion to stop holding quietly. Until tonight, he had not been certain he would ever need to. Now here is the part nobody else in that lobby understood yet. Sandra Price had not refused Shaquille O'Neal a room because of what he looked like, though that is what the story would become when the bellhop named Terrence told it later. She had refused him because 43 minutes before he walked through the door, her regional director had called and told her that Arthur Gill, the CEO of the Meridian Group, was flying in for a surprise property inspection at 7 a.m. sharp and would need the best available suite held and 2 additional rooms for his team. And Sandra Price had been managing this hotel for 11 years and had learned exactly one thing that held across all of them. When Arthur Gill did a surprise inspection, the careers that survived were the ones that had anticipated him. She had held those rooms the way you hold a breath. She had not known, when the man in the gray Henley and the worn New Balance shoes set his duffel on her lobby floor, that he was the reason Arthur Gill was coming. She had not known that the 7 a.m. call she was clearing rooms for was the same 7 a.m. call that would end with Arthur Gill no longer having a title. Stay with us for the whole video. The room you are watching is smaller than it appears. Shaquille O'Neal was born in Newark, New Jersey in 1972, the son of a woman named Lucille who was small and iron-backed and laughed like a room opening up, and the stepson of a man named Philip Harrison, who was none of those things on the surface, and all of them underneath. Philip Harrison was an army sergeant. He was precise. He was the kind of man whose rooms were always straight, whose boots were always clean, whose word was always exactly as long as it needed to be and never longer. He had a rule for every situation that mattered, and he stated each rule once, because once was enough if you meant it. The rule for hotels: for any room you had to enter and make yours for a night, in any city, on any terms, was stated in Fort Stewart, Georgia in 1987, when Shaq was 15 and the family had just moved again, and the temporary housing was a room above a motor lodge on Route 17, and Shaq had said something about it that he no longer remembered, and Philip Harrison had looked at him from across the room and said, "The room doesn't decide what you are. You decide what you are. Walk in quiet. Let the room do the talking." He said it once. He never said it again. Shaq heard it for the last time in 2013, 3 weeks before Philip died, when Philip was in a hospital bed in San Antonio with tubes in his arm and the particular stillness of a man who has made peace with a thing and would not be argued out of it. He didn't say it as advice. He said it the way you say something when you are reminding yourself. Shaq wasn't sure the words were for him at all. He wrote them in the notebook that night. He had been writing things in that notebook since 1987. The notebook was on its second leather cover. The words inside it were the same. He had been carrying the current notebook since the day of the funeral. He carried it the way some people carry a rosary, not to use, exactly, to have. The leather had darkened at the corners from years of his hands. His mother, Lucille, was the other architecture. She was the one who had made him understand that money was not the same thing as power, and power was not the same thing as presence, and presence was the thing that could not be purchased or performed. "Baby," she had said once, He was 17. He was already being scouted. He was already starting to understand what was coming. There are going to be rooms that try to tell you what you're worth. You already know what you're worth. Don't have that conversation. She had tapped his chest twice when she said it, right over the place where the notebook would eventually live. Shaq went to LSU. He went first overall in 1992. He became 4-time champion, 15-time All-Star, one of 11 players in NBA history to score 40,000 career points. He bought properties. He built companies. He made one investment in October of 2020 through a holding entity called CN Capital Partners, at the recommendation of a financial advisor who understood his philosophy. Find companies that needed a different kind of leadership. Come in quietly and let time do the work. The Meridian Group had needed a different kind of leadership for 3 years. Sandra Price had not wanted to be a hotel manager. What she had wanted, when she wrote it down at 19 in a community college notebook in Charlotte, North Carolina, was to own something. A small inn, maybe. 15 rooms, a place where she made the decisions all the way down, where the hospitality was hers, where nobody above her could override the things she had built with her own sense of what it meant to welcome someone. That was the original plan. Life did not take her there in a straight line. Her mother got sick. She needed income that was reliable and immediate rather than eventual and self-built. She got a front desk job at a Marriott in Charlotte in 1997 and was good at it in the way that some people are good at things they did not choose. Efficiently, thoroughly, without joy, but without complaint. She moved up. She moved to a Westin. She moved again. By 2011, she was the general manager of the Meridian Grand Atlanta, which was not the small inn she had imagined at 19, but was the closest available shape of the things she had wanted. And then, Arthur Gill became CEO of the Meridian Group in 2014. Arthur Gill ran a hotel company the way a person runs a hotel company when they have never worked in a hotel. With metrics, with uniformity, with a philosophy of brand consistency that left less and less room for the judgment of the people on the ground. Sandra had received 17 directives in the last 8 years. 11 of them required her to do something that her 19-year-old self would have recognized as wrong small things, each one separately defensible, together forming a shape she did not like looking at directly. The call from the regional director on the evening of November 7th, hold the suites. Gill is coming. Inspection at 7, was the 18th. She had held the rooms. She had not known what holding the rooms would cost. On the morning of November 8th, she would. She had gone to bed at 11:45 p.m., thinking that the largest problem in her evening had been the large man in the gray Henley who had looked at her key cards and said all right twice and sat in the lobby wingback for 12 minutes before getting up, picking up his duffel, and walking out the front door. She had watched him go from behind the desk. She had felt something she did not examine closely enough to name. She had gone back to her computer. She had not known his name. She had not checked it. She was on her 18th directive, and she was tired in the specific way that people are tired when they have been making the small wrong choice for 8 years and have become fluent enough at it that it no longer announces itself as a choice. Terence Okafor was 22 years old and had been a bellhop at the Meridian Grand for 4 months, which was long enough to know the hotel's rhythms and short enough to still be disturbed by them. He was pre-law at Georgia State, working nights to cover the gap between his scholarship and his rent. He was the kind of young man who noticed things, what people carried, how they held it, what their eyes did when they were being told something that wasn't true. He had been standing near the entrance when Shaq walked in. He had seen the reservation check. He had seen Sandra's eyes go to the key cards. He had seen the 3 sticky notes that said hold, VIP, and he had known, with the certainty of someone who had restocked that same desk twice tonight, that those 3 suites were empty. He had not said anything. He had watched the man pick up his duffel and sit in the wingback chair. He had watched him sit there for 12 minutes without his phone. He had not seen many people sit in a hotel lobby for 12 minutes without their phone. He had gone about his work. He had caught the man's eye as he stood to leave. Something had passed between them. Not recognition, not words, just the specific acknowledgement of 2 people who have both seen the same thing and both know it. Terrence had given one small nod. The man had returned it. Then he had walked out. At 11:15, after his shift ended, Terrence sat in his car in the parking garage and thought about what he had seen and what he had not done about it. He thought about it for a long time. Then he took out his phone and opened a hospitality industry review platform that allowed anonymous staff submissions. He wrote 4 sentences. He posted it. He went home. He did not know what those 4 sentences would meet when they landed. 3 other things were happening simultaneously that he had no way of knowing about. In a suite 2 floors above the lobby, an executive named Malcolm Reeves, who worked for CN Capital Partners and had been in Atlanta since Tuesday, was reviewing a document he had been preparing for 6 weeks. Across town, in a car outside Hartsfield-Jackson, Arthur Gill was on his phone, telling his assistant which room to have ready, and at a Marriott Courtyard on Peachtree Street, in a room that was smaller than any room in the Meridian Grand, and had a view of a parking structure, and a bed that was a bed and nothing more. Shaquille O'Neal was sitting on the edge of that bed, with his notebook open on his knee, writing in it with the same pen he always used. A black uni ball that he bought in packs of 12. The ceiling fan made a sound. The parking structure outside the window was lit orange. He wrote 2 words and closed the notebook and lay back and was asleep by 10:47. He had a 7A. Call. Nobody moved through the rest of that night without carrying something they couldn't see the shape of yet. The call began at 7 a.m. Exactly. Arthur Gill joined from a suite on the 4th floor of the Meridian Grand. He had a coffee and a legal pad and the specific confidence of a man who has never had a room refused to him. Shaq joined from a Marriott Courtyard on Peachtree, sitting in the chair beside the window, with his notebook closed on the table beside him and the orange glow of the parking structure already fading in the November morning light. Also on the call, Malcolm Reeves of CEN Capital Partners. 2 attorneys. A board member named Carla Hutchins, who had been waiting for this conversation for 8 months. The dispute had been documented and reviewed, and the position of CN Capital Partners had been stated in writing on 3 separate occasions over the course of that review. It concerned the Meridian Group's community investment policy, specifically a set of programs Arthur Gill had defunded in 2021 in favor of revenue optimization initiatives that produced better quarterly numbers and worse neighborhoods. 47 community partnerships dissolved. 11 workforce development programs ended. A culinary training pipeline that had placed 340 people in hospitality jobs since 2016 shut down because the numbers said the return was too slow. The numbers were right. The analysis was wrong. Shaq had not spoken publicly about the dispute. He had not needed to. He had the votes. The call lasted 41 minutes. At 7:41 a.m., Carla Hutchins moved to accept the recommendation of CEN Capital Partners. The motion carried. Arthur Gill sat on the 4th floor of the Meridian Grand in a suite that had been held for him the night before, and he listened to the motion carry, and he set down his legal pad. At 8:03 a.m., Malcolm Reeves sent an email to the regional director of the Meridian Group's Southeast Properties. The email contained 4 lines. The regional director read those 4 lines and picked up his phone and made a call to the Meridian Grand Atlanta. Sandra Price took the call at her desk at 8:17 a.m. She was told that Arthur Gill's contract had been terminated effective that morning. She was told that the interim leadership structure would be communicated within 72 hours. She was told one additional thing that the regional director delivered with the particular flatness of someone reading from a document, that an anonymous staff submission regarding the events of the previous evening had been flagged internally, and that the holding company had requested a direct conversation with her before any further decisions were made. She sat at her desk for a while after she hung up. She looked at the 3 key cards still on the corner of her desk, the yellow sticky notes still on them. She picked them up, one at a time, and peeled the sticky notes off, and put the notes in the trash, and set the cards in the key return tray. She did this slowly, the way you do something when you know it is too late for the action to mean anything, but you need to do it anyway. Her phone rang at 9 a.m. The voice on the other end said, "Miss Price, this is Shaquille O'Neal." She had not known his name when she made the decision the night before. She knew it now. "I'd like to have a conversation," he said. "Not about last night. About the next 11 years. A pause. Not long. Just enough. You've been running this property since 2011. I've read what you've built here when someone let you build it. I want to know what you'd build if there were no one above you telling you what to hold." Silence on Sandra's end, the kind of silence that happens when a person has been running on a particular kind of exhaustion for so long that the sudden absence of it has no immediate sound. "I have some ideas," she said finally. "I assumed you did," Shaq said. "That's why I called you first." Now here is what the lobby had not known that night, and what Sandra Price was only now beginning to understand. The reason Arthur Gill had called a surprise inspection was not the property. It was the paper trail. Malcolm Reeves had been in Atlanta since Tuesday conducting a quiet operational review, and Gill had heard about it through a contact, and the inspection was his attempt to establish a physical presence in the building before the board call. A last claim on the ground. The 3 suites Sandra held had not been held for Gill's comfort. They had been held as a demonstration of loyalty to a man who was, by 7:41 a.m., no longer in a position to receive it. She had denied a room to the person she was actually loyal to in order to please the person she was about to lose. She had done it in the dark. Most of the things we do that we regret, we do in the dark. The Terence Okafor submission had flagged the incident, but Shaq had already known. He had been in the lobby. He had seen the key cards. He had said all right twice. He had sat in the wingback for 12 minutes, not because he was deciding whether to make a call, but because he was deciding whether to make a scene. He had decided not to. He had walked out. He had slept at the courtyard and let the morning do what the morning was already going to do. His stepfather had been right about that too. A bellhop named Terence Okafor who had watched something happen that he knew was wrong and written 4 sentences about it at 11:15 p.m. in a parking garage, found out 3 weeks later that those 4 sentences had reached a board meeting. He received a letter from the interim leadership of the Meridian Group offering him a named scholarship for the remainder of his law degree and a standing offer of employment upon passing the bar, if he wanted it. He read the letter twice. He put it down. He picked it up again. He had not known, when he wrote 4 sentences in a parking garage, that anyone would read them. He had written them anyway. That is the whole lesson. That is the entire lesson. A general manager named Sandra Price, who had spent 8 years making 17 small wrong choices under a man who was wrong at scale, sat down the following Monday with a legal pad and wrote for the first time in 11 years what she would build if someone let her build it. She sent it to Malcolm Reeves at CN Capital Partners. He forwarded it to Shaq with one line: "This is what we were looking for." She was named Permanent General Manager with an expanded operating mandate 6 weeks later. The first thing she did was call the coordinator of the culinary training pipeline that had been shut down in 2021 and ask what it would take to restart it. The coordinator said a phone call was all it ever needed. "I've been waiting," and Shaquille O'Neal, who had walked into a lobby in Atlanta on a November evening in gray and worn New Balance shoes and been told by a woman behind a dark wood desk that there was no room for him. Shaquille O'Neal slept in a Courtyard Marriott on Peachtree Street and woke up at 6:15 and opened his notebook and read the 2 words he had written the night before and got on a call that lasted 41 minutes and changed the direction of a company, and then called the woman who had refused him not to correct her, but to ask her what she'd been waiting 11 years to build. Philip Harrison had said it once in Fort Stewart, Georgia in 1987. He never said it again because once was enough. Walk in quiet. Let the room do the talking. The room talked. Drop a comment right now and tell us where you are watching from, because this channel reaches people in places we never expected, and we want to know where you are tonight. If this one said something that needed saying, the like button is right there. Every one of them tells us to keep going. Subscribe and join a community that believes the quietest people in the room are sometimes the ones who own it. The next video is already there. We will see you there.